On Thursday, April 8th, I sat a good part of the evening with Johnson, but he was very silent. He said, "Burnet's history of his own times is very entertaining. The style indeed is mere chit-chat. I do not believe that Burnet intentionally lied, but he was so much prejudiced that he took no pains to find out the truth. He was like a man who resolves to regulate his time by a certain watch, but will not inquire whether the watch is right or not." Though he was not disposed to talk, Johnson was unwilling that I should leave him, and when I looked at my watch and told him it was 12 o'clock, he cried, "What's that to you and me?" and ordered Frank to tell Mrs. Williams that we were coming to drink tea with her, which we did. It was settled that we should go to church together next day. On the 9th of April, being Good Friday, I breakfasted with him at tea and crossbuns. Dr. Levitt, as Frank called him, making the tea. He carried me with him to the church of St. Clementines, where he had his seat, and his behavior was, as I had imagined to myself, solemnly devout. I never shall forget the tremulous earnestness with which he pronounced the awful petition in the litany, "In the hour of death and all the day of judgment, good Lord, deliver us." We went to church both in the morning and evening. In the interval between the two services we did not dine, but he read in the Greek New Testament and I turned over several of his books. In Archbishop Laud's diary I found the following passage, which I read to Dr. Johnson. Quote, 1623, February 1st, Sunday. I stood by the most illustrious Prince Charles, afterwards Charles I, at dinner. He was then very merry and talked occasionally of many things with his attendants. Among other things, he said that if he were necessitated to take any particular profession of life, he could not be a lawyer, adding his reasons. "I cannot," said he, "defend a bad nor yield in a good cause." Johnson said to this, "Sir, this is false reasoning, because every cause is a bad side, and the lawyer is not overcome, though the cause which he has endeavored to support he be determined against him." I told him that Goldsmith had said to me a few days before, "As I take my shoes from the shoemaker and my coat from the tailor, so I take my religion from the priest." I regretted this loose way of talking. Johnson said, "Sir, he knows nothing. He has made up his mind about nothing." To my great surprise, he asked me to dine with him on Easter Day. I never supposed that he had a dinner at his house, for I had not then heard of anyone of his friends having been entertained at his table. He told me, "I generally have a meat pie on Sunday. It is baked at a public oven, which is very properly allowed, because one man can attend it, and thus the advantage is obtained of not keeping servants from church to dress dinners." April 11th, being Easter Sunday, after having attended divine service at St. Paul's, I repaired to Dr. Johnson's. I had gratified my curiosity much in dining with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, while he lived in the wilds of Neufchâtel. I had as great a curiosity to dine with Dr. Samuel Johnson in the dusky recess of a court in Fleet Street. I suppose we should scarcely have knives and forks, and only some strange, uncouth, ill-dressed dish, but I found everything in very good order. We had no other company but Mrs. Williams and a young woman. Later footnote says, perhaps Miss Carmichael, whom I did not know. As a dinner here was considered as a singular phenomenon, and as I was frequently interrogated on the subject, my readers may perhaps be desirous to know our bill of fare. Foot, I remember. In allusion to Francis, the Negro, that's Johnson's servant, was willing to suppose that our repast was black broth. But the fact was that we had a very good soup, a boiled leg of lamb and spinach, a veal pie, and a rice pudding. Of Dr. John Campbell, the author, he said, He is a very inquisitive and a very able man, and a man of good religious principles, though I am afraid he has been deficient in practice. Campbell is radically right, and we may hope that in time there will be good practice. He owned that the thought Hawkesworth was one of his imitators, but he did not think Goldsmith was. Goldsmith, he said, had great merit. I said, "But, sir, he is much indebted to you for getting so high in the public estimation." And Johnson said, "Why, sir, he has perhaps got sooner to it by his intimacy with me." Goldsmith, though his vanity often excited him to occasional competition, had a very high regard for Johnson, which he at this time expressed in the strongest manner in the dedication of his comedy entitled She Stoops to Conquer. By inscribing this slight performance to you, I do not mean so much to compliment you as myself reads this dedication. It may do me some honor to inform the public that I have lived many years in intimacy with you. It may serve the interest of mankind also to inform them that the greatest wit may be found in a character without impairing the most unaffected piety. Johnson observed that there were very few books printed in Scotland before the Union. He had seen a complete collection of them in the possession of the Honourable Archibald Campbell, a nonjuring bishop. See an account of this learned and respected gentleman, and of his curious works in the Middle State, in my Journal of the Tour of the Hebrides, on sale now where finer books are sold. I wish this collection had been kept entire. Many of them are in the library of the Faculty of Advocates at Edinburgh. I told Dr. Johnson that I had some intention to write the life of the learned and worthy Thomas Rudiman. He said, "I should take pleasure in helping you to do honor to him." But his farewell letter to the Faculty of Advocates, when he resigned the office of their librarian, should have been in Latin. I put a question to him upon a fact in common life, which he could not answer, nor have I found anyone else who could. What is the reason that women servants, though obliged to be at the expense of purchasing their own clothes, have much lower wages than men servants to whom a great proportion of that article is furnished, and when in fact our female house servants work much harder than the male? He told me that he had 12 or 14 times attempted to keep a journal of his life, but never could preserve. Johnson advised me to do it. "The great thing is to be recorded," said he, "is the state of your own mind, and you should write down everything that you remember, for you cannot judge at first what is good or bad, and write immediately while the impression is fresh, for it will not be the same a week afterwards." I again solicited him to communicate to me the particulars of his early life. He said, "You shall have them all for 2d. I hope you shall know a great deal more of me before you write my life." He mentioned to me this day many circumstances which I wrote down when I went home, and have interwoven in the former part of this narrative. On Tuesday, April 13th, he and Dr. Goldsmith and I dined at General Oglethorpe's. Goldsmith expatiated on the common topic that the race of our people was degenerated, and that this was owing to luxury. Johnson said, "Sir, in the first place, I doubt the fact. I believe there are as many tall men in England now as ever there were. But secondly, supposing the stature of our people to be diminished, that is not owing to luxury, for, sir, consider to how very small a proportion of our people luxury can reach. Our soldiery, surely, are not luxurious, who live on 6d. a day. And the same remark will apply to almost all the other classes. Luxury, so far as it reaches the poor, will do good to the race of people. It will strengthen and multiply them. Sir, no nation can ever hurt by luxury, for, as I said before, it can reach but to a very few. I admit that the great increase of commerce and manufacturers hurts the military spirit of a people, because it produces a competition for something else than martial honors, a competition for riches. It also hurts the bodies of the people, For you will observe there is no man who works at any particular trade, but you may know him from his appearance to do so. One part of or other of his body being more used than the rest, he is in some degree deformed. But, sir, that is not luxury. A tailor sits cross-legged, but that is not luxury. Goldsmith said, Come, you're just going to the same place by another road. And Johnson said, Nay, sir, I say that is not luxury. Let us take a walk from Charing Cross to Whitechapel, though, I suppose, the greatest series of shops in the world. What is there in any of these shops, if you except gin-snop shops, that can do any human being any harm? Goldsmith said, Well, sir, I'll accept your challenge. The very next shop to Northumberland House is a pickle shop. And Johnson said, Well, sir, do we not know that a maid can in one afternoon make pickles sufficient to serve a whole family for a year? Nay, that 5 pickle shops can serve all the kingdom. Besides, sir, there is no harm done to anybody by the making of pickles, or the eating of pickles. Now, I could be wrong, but I think this is the second time pickles have come up in the Life of Johnson. Who would have thought? I wonder if they're in the index, in fact. Let's just check real quick. Pickles. I wonder what the significance of pickles were back then. Was it a new invention or something? Oh yeah, Pickles 514. Oh no, that's this though. I could have sworn pickles was mentioned before though. Oh well. Maybe not. We drank tea with the ladies, and Goldsmith sung Tony Lumpkin's song in his comedy, She Stoops to Conquer, and a very pretty one to an Irish tune, The Humours of Ballingarry, which he had designed for Miss Hardcastle. But as Mrs. Buckley, who played the part, could not sing, it was left out. He afterwards wrote it down for me, by which means it was preserved and now appears among his poems. Dr. Johnson, in his way home, stopped at my lodgings in Piccadilly and sat with me, drinking tea at a second time, till a late hour. I told him that Mrs. Macaulay said she wondered how he could reconcile his political principles with his moral. His notions of inequality and subordination were with wishing well to the happiness of all mankind, who might live so agreeably had they all their portions of land and none to domineer over another. Johnson said, Why, sir, I reconcile my principles very well, because mankind are happier in a state of inequality and subordination. Were they to be in this pretty state of equality, they would soon degenerate into brutes. They would become Mondabo's nation. Their tails would grow. Sir, all would be losers were all to work for all. They would have no intellectual improvement. All intellectual improvement arises from leisure. All leisure arises from one working for another. Talking of the family of Stuart, he said, It should seem that the family of present on the throne has now established as good a right as the former family by the long consent of the people, and that to disturb this right might be considered as culpable. At the same time, I own that it is a very difficult position, or question, when considered with respect to the House of Stuart. To oblige people to take oaths as to the disputed right is wrong. I know not whether I could take them, but I do not blame those who do. So conscientious and so delicate was Johnson upon the subject, which had occasioned so much clamour against him. Talking of low law cases, Johnson said, The English reports in general are very poor. Only the half of what has been said is taken down, and of that half much is mistaken. Whereas in Scotland the arguments on each side are deliberately put in writing, to be considered by the court. I think a collection of your cases upon subjects of importance, with the opinions of the judges upon them, would be valuable. On Thursday, April 15th, I dined with him and Dr. Goldsmith at General Paoli's. We found here Signor Martinelli of Florence, author of A History of England in Italian, printed at London. I spoke of Alan Ramsay's Gentle Shepherd in the Scottish dialect as the best pastoral that had ever been written, not only abounding with beautiful rural imagery and just and pleasing sentiments, but being a real picture of manners, and I offered to teach Dr. Johnson to understand it. "No, sir," said he, "I won't learn it. You shall return your superiority by me not knowing it. You shall retain your superiority to me by not knowing it." This brought on a question whether one man is lessened by another's acquiring an equal degree of knowledge with him. It's a little passive-aggressive, Boswell. Johnson asserted the affirmative. I maintained that the position might be true in those kinds of knowledge which produce wisdom, power, and force, so as to enable one man to have the government of others, but that a man is not in any degree lessened by others knowing as well as he what ends is mere pleasure. Eating fine fruits, drinking delicious wines, reading exquisite poetry, perhaps. The general observed that Martinelli was a Whig. Johnson said, "I am sorry for it. It shows the spirit of the times. He is obliged to temporize." I said, "I rather think, sir, that Toryism prevails in this region." Johnson said, "I know not why you should think so, sir. You see your friend, Lord Lyttelton, a nobleman, is obliged in his history to write the most vulgar Whiggism." An animated debate took place whether Martinelli should continue his History of England to the present day. Goldsmith said, "To be sure he should." Johnson said, "No, sir, he would give great offence. He would have to tell of almost all the living great what they do not wish told." Goldsmith said, "It may perhaps be necessary for a native to be more cautious, but a foreigner who comes among us without prejudice may be considered as holding the place of a judge, and may speak his mind freely." Johnson said, "Sir, a foreigner, when he sends a work from the press, ought to be on his guard against catching the error and mistaken enthusiasm of the people among whom he happens to be." Goldsmith said, "Sir, he wants only to sell his history and to tell the truth. One is honest, the other a laudable motive." Johnson said, "Sir, they are both laudable motives. It is laudable in a man to wish to live by his labors, but he should write so as he may live by them, not as he may be knocked on the head. I would advise him to be at callous before he publishes his history of the present age. A foreigner who attaches himself to a political party in this country is in the worst state that can be imagined. He is looked upon as a mere intermeddler. A native may do it from interest." I said, "Or principle?" Goldsmith said, "There are people who tell 100 political lies every day, and are not hurt by it. Surely, then, one man may tell the truth with safety." Johnson said, "Why, sir, in the first place, he who tells 100 lies has disarmed the force of his lies. But besides, a man had rather have 100 lies told to him than one truth which he does not wish should be told." Goldsmith said, "For my part, I'd tell truth and shame the devil." And Johnson said, "Yes, sir, but the devil will be angry. I wish to shame the devil as much as you do, but I should choose to be out of the reach of his claws." Goldsmith said, "His claws can do you no harm when you have the shield of truth." It had been being observed that there was little hospitality in London. Johnson said, Nay, sir, any man who has a name, or who has the power of pleasing, will be very generally invited in London." The same Sterne, I have been told, had engagements for 3 months. This man Sterne. Goldsmith said, "And a very dull fellow." Johnson said, "Why, no, sir." Well, this goes on for quite a while, so they have quite a little bar drinking time, or whatever they're doing. Eating, dining. Till next time, bye from